Blah blah blah, intro, intro, intro. Bojack Horseman. Bojack Horseman. What more do I have to say? Every aspect of the show has been, and will continue to be, analyzed by many people. Created in 2014 by Raphael Bob Waxberg, this is an adult animated sitcom whose primary purpose is to deconstruct its own genre. It's a dense show, with several themes and character quirks to dissect. What do I really have to add here? I don't know. But I'll try my damnedest to tackle this show, in a reasonable time frame. Raphael Bob Waxberg and Lisa Hannawalt, the lead character designer, go back, and I mean way back. They have been friends since high school. They were both theater kids who would constantly joke around together. Bob Waxberg would come up with several stories to complement Hannawalt's sketches. Speaking of Hannawalt, she has a very distinct art style. One of her biggest inspirations was the artist Phoebe Gleckner, whose influence can be clearly seen in Hannawalt's early works. And one motif you'll notice is the use of humans with the heads of animals, her favorite subject being horses. Bob Waxberg and Hannawalt would continue their friendship to adulthood, where they worked together on a webcomic called Tip Me Over, Pour Me Out, written by Bob Waxberg and drawn by Hannawalt. The comic would follow the musings of a cartoon Bob Waxberg as he goes through his life. A lot of the building blocks of what would become Bojack Horseman can be seen here, with the self-deprecating writing combined with a sort of carefree tone to not bog down the reader too much. There's even a comic where he eats too much cotton candy, something that would look very familiar to any Bojack Horseman fan. Bob Waxberg would eventually move to Los Angeles, where he stayed in a friend's house in the Hollywood Hills. There, looking out of the balcony with a fabulous view of the city, he felt on top of the world, but never more lonely and isolated. It was this moment where he first got the germ of an idea that would eventually become Bojack Horseman. Bojack Horseman follows Bojack Horseman, played by Will Arnett. He is a washed-up actor who was in a very famous TV show back in the 90s. In the present, though, he mostly spends his time drinking, feeling bad about himself, and watching old episodes of Horsing Around.
Little Sabrina grew up right before our eyes, right, Todd? Todd? Todd!
The show that he starred in. Oh yeah, he is also a horse. If there is one thing that will be immediately noticeable, is that this is a world where humans and anthropomorphic animals coexist. The show really wants to remind you of this. One of the main sources of humor here are the various animal puns that are littered all over each episode.
I really shouldn't eat chocolate because it can literally kill me.
From background details to entire character traits. The show really gets a lot of mileage from its world, but it never goes too deep. It's not the type of show that's interested in using animals in any sort of allegorical way. It's just funny. After years of doing nothing of note, Bojack wants to return to relevance. In order to do that, he starts working on an autobiography. However, Bojack suffers from a writer's worst enemy, writer's block.
Chapter 1.
He also has to deal with his roommate, Todd Chavez, played by Aaron Paul, whose credits include Breaking Bad, as Jesse Pinkman. Todd is a funny little guy who is constantly getting himself into misadventures.
And if you don't deliver...
Though he doesn't seem like much, he has a good heart, and his carefree attitude makes for a great contrast to Bojack's constant self-loathing and judgmental personality.
And even though you don't want anyone to know it,
You secretly have a good heart.
Bojack is unable to make any progress on the book, causing his publisher, Pinky Penguin, to urge him to hire a ghostwriter. Pinky's company is on the brink of collapse, so they need a bestseller, and quick. But Bojack declines, telling Pinky to give him one more week. After a week, Bojack has still made no progress, but he has broken up with his girlfriend and agent, Princess Carolyn, played by Amy Sedaris. Princess Carolyn is a no-nonsense, fast-talking pink cat. She is adept at keeping her personal and professional life separate, as seen here when she doesn't lose her stride as Bojack's agent.
Oh my god, we just broke up.
Yeah, but I'm still your agent. I pride myself on my ability to separate my professional life from my personal life.
Mr. Peanut Butter notices them and joins the conversation with his iconic line.
What is this, a crossover episode?
Played by Paul F. Tompkins, Mr. Peanut Butter was also in a 90s sitcom, Mr. Peanut Butter's House. Despite being in largely the same situation as Bojack, Mr. Peanut Butter manages to be eternally optimistic and charismatic in the Labrador Retriever kind of way. Everything tends to go right with him, causing Bojack to develop a deep resentment of him. Anyways, tired of waiting an eternity for Bojack to write something, Pinky recommends a ghostwriter, Diane Nguyen.
She's cute.
They eventually meet at a party. where they hit it off pretty well. It seems like Diane might be the one person who could understand Bojack.
You have to spend a lot of time with me, probably get sick of me.
I don't think that's going to happen.
She's also Mr. Peanut Butter's girlfriend. Played by Alison Brie, Diane is the smart, bookish ghostwriter tasked to write Bojack's biography. Her and Bojack's relationship evolves and takes many turns throughout the show, but for the time being, she is pretty patient with him and pleasant to be around. These 5 characters may seem simple on the surface, but they all have hidden depths that will be explored extensively throughout the show's 6-season run. They really turn from the general character archetypes that you see in a lot of media to fully fleshed out 3-dimensional people. However, this isn't evident at first. The first season has a reputation for being pretty rough at the start. You couldn't be blamed for thinking this was yet another Family Guy clone.
Normal words, but a horse guy.
With its asshole main character, raunchy humor, and cutaway gags, this has all the hallmarks of the standard adult animated sitcom. Even in the commentaries, the crew talk about various jokes that they would not make anymore.
Raphael, how do you feel about that sex scene that's in there?
I would not put that in the show now. Also don't love this Bojack knocking over a baby gag. These jokes about Diane's last name, I also would not do now.
This isn't to say that it isn't funny. In fact, one of the funniest episodes is actually the second one, but it's hard to believe that the show would evolve much further than this. However, I believe that this was somewhat intentional. A core aspect of the identity of the show is the subversion of what one would expect from this kind of show, and in order to do that, you need to establish the expectations in the first place, and leaning into these expectations would in turn make the subversions particularly stand out. It may seem like an episodic show at first, but there is an inkling of serialization that can be even seen in the first few episodes. We also start seeing the writers experiment with how far they can push Bojack's awfulness. We see him have sex with his former co-star, Sarah Lynn. We see him sabotage Todd's rock opera with the help of character actress Margot Martindale, because he doesn't want Todd moving out. But at the same time, we start seeing glimpses into his childhood, one that is very not normal.
Mommy, can I have an omelet?
You're the birthday boy.
A running theme of the show is how reality does not have issues that neatly resolve in 30 minutes, contrary to what sitcoms would have you believe.
When you get home from a long day of getting kicked in the urethra, you just want to watch a show about good, likable people who love each other. Where, no matter what happens, at the end of 30 minutes, everything's going to turn out okay.
Every action will lead to long-lasting consequences, be it minor or major, and the show really leans hard into this. Nothing ever resets in the show, no matter how minor it seems. This can be seen in Prickly Muffin, where Todd breaks the leg of Bojack's bed. For the next several episodes, the bed will be propped up by various objects, and the most infamous example of this comes in Our Story is a D Story, where Bojack steals the D from the Hollywood sign.
Weirder.
And it blows up. For the rest of the series, the D never comes back, causing everyone to start referring to the city as Hollywood. Of course, background gags aren't the only instance of this theme coming to play. There are many overarching plot lines that do not resolve within an episode, and Bojack's actions would inevitably come back to haunt him. Many fans consider episode 8, The Telescope, to be the turning point of the series. The first episode to spend a considerable amount of time in flashback. The episode follows the relationship between Bojack and his former best friend, Herb Casaz. Bojack and Herb had a falling out, and they haven't seen each other in decades. But after finding out that Herb has contracted ass cancer, Bojack feels the need to make amends to him. In the meantime, he tells Diane what happened between them, leading to the flashback. Herb created Horseman around, and it was because of him that Bojack became a star.
If they want my show, then that horse is gonna be BJ goddamn Horseman.
But after several successful seasons, it comes out that Herb was gay, which was not acceptable in the 90s, or now really. Because of this, the producer, Angela Diaz, plans to fire him. Bojack could back up Herb and threaten to walk out of the show, but as Charlotte, Herb's girlfriend, states,
I think you're a coward.
he doesn't want to jeopardize his career and upcoming film, so Herb gets fired, and Bojack hasn't reached out since. So while unexpected, it's understandable that Herb doesn't forgive Bojack when he apologizes.
I'm sorry. Okay, I don't forgive you.
The expectation is that Herb forgives Bojack, and he gets closure on his guilt, but Herb doesn't want to give him closure, because he doesn't deserve it. Herb has clearly moved on with his life. He's done a lot with it, but Bojack could never let himself move on from the past, and he will have to live with his guilt for the rest of his life.
Now get the fuck out of my house.
The latter half of Season 1 is where the series truly comes into its own. We start seeing vulnerabilities in the characters, particularly Bojack, Diane, and even Princess Carolyn in her Spotlight episode. Bojack and Diane's relationship starts to get strained when Bojack keeps making advances on her, despite her impending marriage to Mr. Peanut Butter. This all comes to a head when Diane shows Bojack her draft of the memoir, and Bojack hates it.
What the shit was that?
Even though he allowed Diane to write the memoir, warts and all, he finds there to be too much wart, but Diane really believes in the book, and she's proven right when she leaks the first few chapters. People are now more interested than ever in Bojack, but this doesn't stop Bojack from firing her.
You're fired.
Taking matters into his own hands, Bojack decides to write the whole book in 1 week. The penultimate episode of each season basically acts as the climax to the arc, and with the help of Todd, Sarah Lynn, and a generous amount of drugs, Bojack ends up in a kaleidoscopic bender that journeys through his mind. We see his regrets and crushed dreams, leading to the revelation that he's not a good person, and Diane's book is a lot more accurate than he wants to believe. But he can't accept this. He wants to believe he can be better. That it's not too late.
Tell me, please, Diane, tell me that I'm good.
The finale of every season serves as a way to tie up all the loose ends and set up for the next season. Diane's book gets released to great reception. Bojack even wins a Golden Globe somehow. Bojack is on the map again. He soon gets the opportunity to do his dream project, a film that he wanted to do for his whole life. He got casted to play the part of Secretariat, a racehorse that Bojack idolized since childhood. He goes to tell Diane the good news. They meet on the rooftop, like they have a few times before, and Diane answers whether or not people can be good deep down.
That's the thing. I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do.
Well, that's depressing.
So with the movie about to begin shooting, Bojack is ready to go Hollywood. Speaking of which, one of the main sources of mockery in this show is the Hollywood industry. It kinda comes with the territory of being a comedy that takes place there. They really struck a balance between making a completely fictionalized version of the city, like Springfield in The Simpsons, and a more grounded, realistic setting, a la The Critic.
Like, I didn't want it to feel like it took place in Springfield. I wanted to feel like it took place more like in the Critic's New York.
Yeah.
Which felt more lived in and real.
And canceled.
And canceled. And I think I was wrong to be nervous, because I think actually what we found is that, look at all these wonderful background characters.
While very exaggerated, Bojack's Los Angeles still feels like a real and accurate portrayal of the city. The essence is still there. The vapid superficiality that hides its seedy underbelly. The fact that the media over-dramatizes issues, only to forget about them moments later. And just the general corporate feel that will sap the creativity out of everyone. It's not a flattering portrayal, but you can tell that it comes from a genuine place. Another funny observation is that whenever a celebrity refuses to voice themselves, something bad happens to their character.
Whoa! Jesus Christ! My ankle!
Everyone in Hollywood is replaceable. This was seen before with Herb, and it can still be seen when Bojack gets his face scanned to make a CGI version of him, just in case anything were to happen. This feels oddly prophetic. Otherwise, Bojack seems to be turning his life around. He got his dream job, he's starting to get more active, he even got a new couch, but he soon learned something concerning.
Oh shit. I'm not an actor.
He owes his entire career to Herb, who just wanted his friend to be successful. The future seemed bright then, but it was just a facade, and now Herb is dead. But hey, at least we get a Horseman Around reunion episode out of it. One of Bojack's defining traits is his inability to move on from the past, and this theme is especially prevalent throughout this season. It even begins with a flashback to Bojack as a child, watching Secretariat read his letter, and give him advice. He tells them,
Don't you ever look behind you. There's nothing for you behind you. All that exists is what's ahead.
Bojack tries to heed this advice in the beginning, but the past will eventually catch up to him. Bojack's mother, Beatrice, contacts him again after reading the book. Bojack reunites with his co-stars at Herb's funeral, and most notably, he starts dating someone who just woke up from a coma. Wanda Pierce literally came from the 80s, which is an immediate green flag for Bojack. She has no preconceived notions of Bojack. She's never even heard of him, giving him a fresh, untainted start to a relationship.
Bojack Horseman.
Who?
Bojack.
Who?
Bojack Horseman.
Is that name supposed to mean something to me?
And while Bojack's love life is blossoming, Diane's is on the rocks. There are aspects of her and Mr. Peanut Butter's personalities that are fundamentally opposed to each other. Diane is reserved and hates big gestures, but Mr. Peanut Butter would not stop doing them. He craves attention, and one of his big gestures would result in a big fight between them. But even though they constantly butt heads, you can still sense the genuine love that they have for each other. It leaves the audience questioning whether or not they're right for each other. It really can go one way or another. The second season would also begin to comment on bigger social issues, something that would become a staple for the show. The most prominent example this season would be Hank After Dark. The episode centers around the allegations against a beloved celebrity, Hank Hippopopoulos, a reflection of the rampant abuse of power seen in Hollywood. Something that I appreciate in this episode is that they keep the allegations ambiguous, allowing the theme of the episode to be more evergreen. Since Diane broke the news, a lot of ire has been directed at her.
Those are death threats. People want to murder my wife.
The death threats, her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter, and her general feeling of uselessness in Hollywood has led Diane to go to a war-torn Cordovia, where she really feels like she can make a difference. Meanwhile, Princess Carolyn brings J.D. Salinger back from the dead, Mr. Peanut Butter hosts a game show, and Todd joins an improv group. A not-so-subtle parody of a certain cult that a lot of celebrities are a part of.
Scientology is not a cult. Improv is a cult. I want to be very clear. This is about improv.
Despite the dark themes explored in the show, it's still fundamentally a comedy, and it can get pretty goofy sometimes. Combining a sort of comedy with a depressing subject matter can run the risk of creating tonal whiplash, but the show somehow manages to balance the opposing tones. Oftentimes events will be played as a joke, but the consequences will still have realistic emotional ramifications. For example, Herb's death is ridiculously unfortunate.
Herb's cancer had gone into remission. He was full of hope. But on the drive home from the hospital, his brakes gave out. He crashed into a truck full of peanuts. He survived the crash, but he was allergic to peanuts. He died instantly.
But it still carries the same weight as it did if he just died of cancer. The show seems to up its jokes as it gets more depressing, and vice versa, creating a tonal balance necessary to keep the audience from feeling both too comfortable or too miserable. And as the saying goes, misery loves company, and we see this exemplified when Diane comes back from Cordovia. It turns out that the philanthropist she was working for, Sebastian St. Clair, cares more about his ego than the Cordovians. However, she doesn't have the courage to come back to Mr. Peanut Butter after her failure, so she stays with Bojack. Bojack himself is not doing much better. His co-star, Corduroy Jackson, died from autoerotic asphyxiation. He got the director, Kelsey Jennings, fired from his antics, and to top it all off, his movie is getting ruined by the studio, so we now have the situation of two miserable people staying under the same roof. From the first season, some would get the impression that Bojack and Diane were perfect for each other. These impressions soon get crushed as we see them enable each other's self-destructive behavior. This is not a healthy relationship, but is it even possible for Bojack to even have one?
You're Bojack, Horseman. There's no cure for that.
Bojack wants to believe that he's a good person deep down, but many events prove the contrary. As people get to know Bojack, his true nature gets revealed to them. The theme of the public persona versus the real person can be seen in this season. It happened with Hank Hippopopoulos, and it happens to Bojack when Wanda breaks up with him.
You know, it's funny. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
He constantly wants to be a better person, but he never quite gets that while he can externally improve his life, it means nothing if he never tries to better his mental state. But he's too stubborn to try. Instead, he tries to run away from himself, but he's tired of running in circles. He's tired of running in circles.
I'm tired of running in circles. I'm tired of running in circles. I'm tired of running in circles. I'm tired of running in circles.
Let's get it 10 more times.
By leaving Los Angeles, he metaphorically tries to escape from himself. He wants to start a new life with Charlotte in New Mexico. Turns out, she already got married and has kids. She is another person who moved on with her life, while Bojack is still stuck in the past. Charlotte has an ideal, sitcom-ish family, and Bojack wants a piece of it, so he ends up living with them for 2 months. Bojack doesn't belong here, emphasized by the fact that the episode has a completely different opening.
Kyle and the kids.
This is not Bojack's world, he's an intruder, but at the same time, this is the closest Bojack has been to being part of a family, outside horsing around. And Charlotte's family seems to enjoy Bojack's company, but there's still a palpable tension felt here. There's something off about the whole thing, and it seems inevitable that Bojack will mess this up somehow. Bojack taking Charlotte's daughter, Penny, to the prom is the most blatant metaphor for Bojack being stuck in the past. And yes, this is as uncomfortable as it sounds.
Now, boys and girls, if you want to do the Bojack, take your hands and put them on your...
But at least he ends up having a nice moment with Penny afterwards, which is halted by one of Penny's friends getting alcohol poisoning. Bojack provided the booze, of course.
I'm getting you kids some bourbon, and you're gonna cut it with water. That way you don't get hungover.
So with the night ruined, they come back to their house. and Penny tries to make a move on Bojack. For once, Bojack does the right thing and rejects her. After all, it would be a gross abuse of power. So Bojack goes to have a talk with Charlotte. They reminisce about the past for a bit. Then Bojack shows his true intentions.
Let's get out of here right now.
No, Bojack.
You and me. This is real. You know this is real.
Of course, Charlotte doesn't want to leave for Bojack. Her life is fine without him. She moved on, but Bojack hasn't. He thinks that he can just become a new person by leaving Los Angeles, but Los Angeles isn't the tar pit. He is. And until he takes a good long look at himself and learns to move on from the past, his life will never get better.
You make me too sad.
But he doesn't do that. What follows is one of the tensest scenes in the show. Charlotte notices one of the glow stick balloons. A metaphor for her past was Bojack. She follows it to his boat. She opens the door and finds...
No.
Mom!
Charlotte.
Penny, go to your room.
We didn't even do anything!
Now, Penny.
After 2 seasons of skirting the line, Bojack has finally crossed it. The show is no longer about a flawed but lovable jerk, but a genuinely awful person.
If you are not out of my driveway in 30 minutes, I will call the police. And if you ever try to contact me or my family again, I will fucking kill you.
He comes back to Los Angeles as his theme song plays, representing his return to his own world. The following episode would lighten things up as it ends the season. Loose ends tie up, such as Princess Carolyn starting her own agency, Diane getting the job at said agency, and her finally getting the courage to come back to Mr. Peanut Butter. Also, Secretariat wraps up, with a computer-generated Bojack replacing all of the scenes. Like I said, prophetic. After rightfully feeling like a terrible person, Bojack decides to do something heroic and save Todd from the improv cult. After all the shenanigans, Bojack finally reveals that he really does care about Todd.
Letting you stay with me was the best thing I ever did on purpose. And I don't think I ever told you that, but I should have. Because you're my best friend, Todd.
In another act of kindness, he dedicates an orphanage built using the residuals from Horsing Around to Jerb Kazaz. These may be small steps, but it's a start, and it will get easier.
But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier.
Season 3 is all about the awards campaign for Secretariat, and how no matter how successful Bojack is, he can never feel truly satisfied inside. Even though he's finally achieved his lifelong dream, it's not just going to end there. There's always a next. The road to the Oscars is long and arduous, with stiff competition from the likes of George Clooners and Lerner Nerd Capricorn, but with the help of Anna Spanakopita, this should be a breeze. It's clear that Bojack craves validation. It's only human, or horse in this case, but at the same time, he doesn't quite know why he needs it so much. There's a void that he fills with material wealth and meaningless praise, but the hole never gets filled.
And one day, you're gonna look around and you're gonna realize that everybody loves you, but nobody likes you. And that is the loneliest feeling in the world.
His peak was his days at Horsing Around, the last time he was truly happy, but those days are long gone, and if he wants any chance to get nominated for an Oscar, he needs to distance himself from that show.
When people see you, they need to think, Oscar winner, not dumb asshole from an old TV show that nobody cares about.
It is a pretty bad show after all. Oh yeah, my boy Judah gets introduced this season. I love him. Other characters this season introduces is Cuddly Whiskers, who Bojack worked with on his follow-up to Horsing Around back in 2007. It turned out badly.
What's up, bitches?
Anyways, Cuddly Whiskers currently resides in Ojai, where he lives a peaceful life outside the commotion of Hollywood. It turns out that after winning an Oscar, he felt nothing.
Only after you give up everything can you begin to find a way to be happy.
Speaking of feeling nothing, Todd's sexuality is starting to get explored here. Though we briefly see her in Season 1, Todd's ex-girlfriend, Emily, gets her formal introduction this season. After failing to have sex with Todd in 2007, she tries again when she bumps into him and Bojack at a hotel. However, Todd is clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation, so Emily is once again denied sex, so Bojack has sex with her. But it wasn't a complete waste. The event led Todd to come up with an actually sensible idea for once, a rideshare app that serves as a safe space for women. An idea like this needs investors. In comes PB Livin. Mr. Peanut Butter is an interesting character in that everything seems to go right for him.
Oh, it's gonna be great, as it always is, from my perspective.
While everyone around him deals with their own issues, Mr. Peanut Butter can just move through life without a care in the world. That's not to say that he doesn't have any issues. His relationship with Diane is still pretty unstable, but there isn't any big conflict going on with him this season. Mr. Peanut Butter essentially drifts between different pursuits after Hollywood stars and celebrities. What did they know? Did they know things? Let's find out ends. In many ways, he was in the same situation as Bojack was in the beginning of the series, where he doesn't have much going on. But the main difference between him and Bojack is that Mr. Peanut Butter is satisfied with his life. He doesn't need any big project to make something of himself. He's perfectly content with the small misadventures he goes on, much to the annoyance of Princess Carolyn. Princess Carolyn also gets some development here. Starting her own agency is proving to be a lot more demanding than she anticipated. Her resilience and dexterity is starting to crack. This can especially be seen in the episode Old Acquaintance, where she fails at getting Bojack 2 big projects. The mishap caused Bojack to fire her.
So, what do you think?
No.
However, her love life is starting to pick up when she meets Ralph Stilton, a mouse, ironically enough. While she is still able to keep professional, her work-life balance is starting to teeter. Meanwhile, Diane seems to be doing alright with herself as a social media manager. A lot of Diane's stories revolve around the show's political commentary, one of which concerns abortion. Funnily enough, her abortion is not the focus of the episode. It gets resolved in just a few scenes.
1, 2, 3. Abortion.
Get an abortion. Oh no, we said different things!
But it does revolve around her accidentally tweeting about it on Sextina Aquafina's account, leading to a whole ordeal. Additionally, her relationship with Bojack gets put into question. Bojack projects a lot of his feelings about himself onto Diane, even going as far as using the same line against him on her.
I'm not like you, okay? I don't fetishize my own sadness.
I don't fetishize my own sadness.
Bojack is the one who uses his depression as an excuse for his shitty behavior. He always claims that he will get better, but he always ends up making the worst choices.
It's you.
Fuck, man. What else is there to say?
No amount of external validation will fix someone so fundamentally broken. So it doesn't really matter that he didn't get nominated for the Oscar. He feels the same either way. Another target of commentary for the show is the use of child actors. If you notice, the show does not use any child actors, even for the child characters. There is a very good reason for this. It would ring hollow if the show condemns child actors while still using them. This season spotlights 3 former child actors from Horsing Around. Richie Osborne played Goober, a role so associated with him that he couldn't escape it. After molesting some Laker girls, he ends up owning a family-friendly strip club and dealing drugs.
And what about so-called experts who say it's wrong to keep these girls in captivity just so they can amuse and entertain us? Well, to those people I say, stop saying that, okay?
Bradley Hitler-Smith did fare better though, as the owner of a hardware store in Washington. Unfortunately, he throws it all away to make Ethan around, which never saw the light of day.
Oh, maybe. You are not a television star. You have no talent, and I am forgetting your face even as I'm looking at it. Pack your bags, go back to Nowheresville. Thank you for the champagne. Best regards, Anna Spanakopita.
However, the most apparent example of what child stardom can do to someone would come in the form of Sarah Lynn. Sarah Lynn is Bojack Horseman's most tragic character, playing alongside Bojack as Sabrina on Horsing Around. She quickly became the show's breakout star. However, with stardom comes the loss of a normal life. Sarah Lynn never had a childhood. Her whole life she was performing for others. Her parents were neglectful at best and abusive at worst. The closest thing she had to a parental figure was Bojack, and even then he was no Atticus Finch.
You don't stop dancing, and you don't stop smiling, and you give those people what they want.
The show portrays an idealized version of a family, but what the TV doesn't show is everyone's flaws. Their real relationships with each other. They're all just co-stars to each other, well except Sarah Lynn. She formed a pretty strong connection with Bojack, which is not unlike what a lot of child actors go through. However, this bond is not reciprocated by Bojack. Like many child stars, Sarah Lynn grows up to become a disheveled drug addict when she loses relevance. While in the beginning of the series, this is played for comedy. The episode, That's Too Much Man, really hones in on the drama of her situation. The episode opens on a recreation of John Everett Millais' Ophelia, except with Sarah Lynn in place of Ophelia. Sarah Lynn can be read as Bojack Horseman's equivalent of her. A character in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Ophelia had little autonomy and was very obedient to her father. His death led her to spiral into madness until her eventual death. Much like Ophelia, Sarah Lynn had no autonomy as a child star. She didn't even want to be an actor in the first place.
But I want to be an architect.
Sweetheart, Mommy didn't do what Mommy did to that Star Search producer so that you could be an architect.
As a result of this, she spirals into an unstable and self-destructive lifestyle when she grows up. A lifestyle that is only enabled by Bojack. The episode follows Bojack and Sarah Lynn as they go on a drug-fueled bender, during which Bojack tries to make amends with everyone he's harmed, with predictable results. When they get to Anaspanakopita, she tells a story.
On my first day of training, my instructor told me that there are going to be times when you'll see someone in trouble. You're going to want to rush in there and do whatever you can to save them. But you have to stop yourself. Because there are some people you can't save. Because those people will thrash and struggle and try to take you down with them.
Okay, have you noticed that all the characters have been distancing themselves from Bojack? Oh yeah, he also traumatizes Penny again. Throughout the episode, we see that Sarah Lynn never lost her passion for architecture. She's clearly knowledgeable about the subject.
Yeah, you gotta use parallel joints to support that foundation, dumb shit!
Unfortunately, she was never able to apply it. She's constantly asking Bojack to take her to the planetarium.
You know what really kicks ass? The planetarium! You get crazy high in the parking lot, then you go in and get your mind blown by all the trippy galaxies and shit.
That sounds stupid.
Bojack denies her this until she finally breaks down in their hotel room.
Bojack, I don't like anything about me. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. Am I doomed? Are you doomed? Are we all doomed?
No, calm down. Nobody is doomed. And I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to the planetarium.
So we end up at Griffith's Observatory, a location where important scenes tend to be shot.
Right, Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn?
The season ends with an event that the entire season was building up to. An aspect from each episode gets involved in a ridiculous disaster, and only Mr. Peanut Butter can prevent it with the help of his spaghetti strainers that he promised would play off eventually.
Spaghetti or not, here I come.
Bojack also agrees to do Ethan around. That is until he meets his co-star, Chloe.
What do you want to be when you grow up, Chloe?
What do you mean? I want to be like you.
Like me?
I want to be famous.
Oh no.
Not wanting to repeat the same cycle as with Sarah Lynn, he leaves. Driving through the desert, he lets go of the steering wheel, planning to finally end his own life. That is, until he sees a group of horses running through the desert. Bojack isn't present for the season 4 premiere, emblematic of how the other characters are growing more distant from him. They have their own plot lines completely separated from Bojack. Mr. Peanut Butter is now running for governor of California. This is the most over-the-top showcase of how Mr. Peanut Butter can just walk into success. Meanwhile, the whole campaign puts a lot of stress on his relationship with Diane, as his platform goes against everything she stands for. Todd is shown to be more complex than he lets on. He is finally coming to terms with his asexuality, and his spotlight episode is really sweet.
It actually feels nice to finally say it out loud. I am an asexual person. I am asexual.
There is next to no asexual representation in the media, so I'm really glad that a character like Todd exists. They handle his journey with such tact, without sacrificing the show's humor. I would say that Todd is the best example of asexual representation, but it's not like there's much competition.
I'm SpongeBob!
Despite serving as the goofy comic relief of the series, there's still a lot of heart to his character. Through all his wacky antics, he's just a guy in his 20s who is still discovering who he is. Princess Carolyn also gets a lot of development this season, as we see her struggle to have a child. Her fertility issues start to become a major part of her character. This is especially explored in her spotlight episode, Ruthie. Through the framing device of Princess Carolyn's great-granddaughter's school presentation, the episode showcases Princess Carolyn at her most vulnerable. She has a particularly rough day that involves firing Judah.
You're fired.
And finding out that her family heirloom is just fake jewelry. But what truly sets everything off is her miscarriage, her 5th. This is the only time we see Princess Carolyn cry in the series, and in the end, she breaks up with Ralph. and we get one of the most somber endings in the show.
Great-great-granddaughter in the future talking to her class about me. She's poised and funny and tells people about me and how everything worked out in the end. And when I think about that, I think about how everything's going to work out. Because how else could she tell people?
But it's fake.
Yeah, well, it makes me feel better.
Babies are recurring symbols throughout the season. A new character introduced is Hollyhock Mannheim Guerrero Robinson Silberschlag Xiong Fonzarelli McQuack, who comes to Hollywood to meet Bojack, who she believes is her biological father.
Ever since I was a baby, people always said I looked like Bojack Horseman.
That's a terrible thing to say to a baby!
And while the story of the present Horseman generation is happening, we also start exploring the previous. The main theme of the season is generational trauma. Bojack did it before it was cool. The old Sugarman place kicks us off by chronicling a traumatic moment in Beatrice's childhood, as Bojack squats in her old abandoned house. With the help of his neighbor Eddie, they spend 8 months restoring the house. Interspersed are flashbacks to Beatrice's family as they deal with the death of her brother, Crackerjack, in World War II. Beatrice's father, Joseph Sugarman, is shown to be callous and abusive, despite his charismatic and friendly demeanor. He is definitely a product of the 40s, being deeply misogynistic and unable to properly deal with the intense emotions that his family is going through.
Well, I'd love to stay, but I must be going. As a modern American man, I am woefully unprepared to manage a woman's emotions. I was never taught, and I will not learn.
Because of this, Beatrice's mother, Honey Sugarman, never had a healthy outlet for her emotions, leading her to get drunk at a party and making Beatrice drive her home, resulting in a crash. Joseph then lobotomizes her, as a standard practice in the 40s.
Beatrice, promise me you'll never love anyone as much as I loved Crackerjack.
I promise. I won't.
Why, I have half a mind.
In the end, Bojack decides to demolish the house and go back to Los Angeles. He realizes that he doesn't want to wallow in the past anymore, like Eddie does.
You think I just want to mope around in a shrine to the past, getting off on my own guilt while the rest of my life passes me by? Pathetic much?
But one thing to get out of this episode is that Beatrice will become a major character moving forward.
Fuck you, Mom!
After getting her kicked out from her nursery home, Beatrice ended up living with Bojack and Hollyhock. In the present day, Beatrice has deteriorated significantly and is suffering from dementia.
Do I know you?
Here we go.
The season adds a real mystery aspect to the show. The search for Hollyhock's mother, as well as the glimpses into Beatrice's fractured memory, provides intrigue that will leave the audience wanting answers. Joseph has instilled some very toxic traits onto Beatrice. This can plainly be seen with how she raised Bojack, and this will continue as Hollyhock lives with them. Hollyhock's way is a frequent subject of criticism from Beatrice.
You are so beautiful. You could be thin too. Just go easy on the sweets, and when you go somewhere, don't walk. Gallop. Ice cold, Grammy Graham.
Being a product of an older time and Joseph's parenting, Beatrice has a warped view of beauty. Additionally, Hollyhock starts acting strange after Beatrice starts living with them. She exhibits compulsive behavior, such as counting her teeth, rapidly changing channels, and sorting loose change. She is also noticeably losing weight, getting to the point where she's constantly pulling up her pants. It turns out that Beatrice was spiking the coffee with weight loss supplements, which really explains the title sequence. Hollyhock overdoses on the supplements and is made to go back to her father's. Infuriated by this, Bojack takes Beatrice to the worst home in the city, which kicks off the episode Time Zero. Time Zero is one of my personal favorite episodes of the series. It answers so many questions in a satisfying yet heart-wrenching way. The episode explores Beatrice's past through her fragmented memories. There are so many details that emphasize the fact that we're seeing the story through the perspective of someone with dementia. Faces are removed, memories blend together, and background elements are frequently changing. But through the distortive narrative, a lot of revelations are made. As a child, Beatrice was made fun of for her weight. She also wasn't allowed any sweets like ice cream, instead settling with sugar on lemons. Her family life also drastically went downhill since Crackerjack died and Honey got a lobotomy. To say that Joseph is ill-equipped to raise a daughter by himself is an understatement.
Beatrice, remember what we say about crying? Crying is stupid.
He's completely unable to process emotions to a sociopathic degree, and while he thinks he's being a good parent, it's clear that his actions have deeply traumatized Beatrice. This would lead Beatrice to eventually go against Joseph and run away with Butterscotch, instead of marrying Corbin Creamerman. Corbin is the heir to the Creamerman's creamy cream-based commodities, and Joseph hoped to marry Beatrice off to him so that he can form a partnership with Corbin's father. But in a subversion of the usual formula, it turns out that Corbin would have made a better suitor than Butterscotch. But it's too late for that now, because Beatrice is pregnant.
Oh dear!
Bojack's family is stuck in a cycle of bad parenting, leading to emotionally stunted children. It seemed that Beatrice repressed the trauma that Joseph subjected his family to, even going as far to refer to him as
a man who knew what marriage meant.
Like Joseph, Beatrice was not emotionally prepared to have a child, especially with how sudden the pregnancy was. Therefore, Bojack ended up with a terrible childhood, with parents that always reminded him of how he's unwanted. A lot of what's wrong with Bojack can be traced all the way back to Joseph Sugarman, and possibly even further, and it could have gone for a long time if Beatrice didn't put a stop to it. The maid, Henrietta, ends up pregnant with Butterscotch's child. Knowing that Henrietta is not prepared for a child, Beatrice forces her to give the baby up for adoption.
Don't throw away your dreams for this child. Don't let that man poison your life the way he did mine. You are going to finish your schooling and become a nurse. You'll meet a man, a good man, and you'll have a family. But please believe me, you don't want this. Please, Henrietta, you have to believe me. Please, don't do what I did.
It seems harsh, but it's the best course of action for both Henrietta and the child. She wants to end the cycle, and it's revealed that the baby was Hollyhock. The episode ends with Beatrice at the nursing home, in the worst room Bojack could find, the place where she will spend her remaining days. Confused as to where she is, she eventually recognizes Bojack.
Bojack?
Mom?
But Bojack? Is that you?
And in one of his few selfless acts, he tells her that she's at the lake house in Michigan, describing a pleasant scene.
The crickets are chirping, and the lake is still, and the night is full of stars.
I can see it. It's so clear.
However, when he asks her if she can taste the ice cream, she hesitates. Given the fact that she was never allowed to eat ice cream, she wouldn't know what it tastes like. It seems that her fantasy was broken.
Can you taste the ice cream, Mom?
Oh, Bojack. So delicious.
As we've seen many times before, the show's not afraid to tackle several hard-hitting and controversial themes. It's also not afraid to look inward. Season 5 is the show at its most introspective, as it analyzes and deconstructs the whole concept of having a deeply flawed but relatable protagonist. It asks the question, is it dangerous to have a character who is so obviously a bad person, but still have traits that people can identify with? Is it bad for people to relate to Bojack? This theme is explored through Filbert, the new show that Bojack is starring in. The connection between Bojack and Filbert is immediate. The set for Filbert's house is an exact replica of Bojack's house, albeit from season 1. It's clear that the show wants the audience to view Filbert as a stand-in for Bojack. Filbert is the brainchild of Flip McVicker, who embodies the pretentious screenwriter stereotype.
The darkness is a metaphor for darkness.
Oh, so that's why they're called noirs. He pitched the series to Princess Carolyn, who mainly greenlit it because it shares the same name as the child she wanted. Continuing from the previous season, Princess Carolyn starts trying to adopt a child. Of course, the process of adopting is very taxing on her, and it leads her to go back to her hometown of Eden, North Carolina. Of course, her work will still follow and mess things up. After coming to terms with his asexuality, Todd finds it hard to find a relationship. See, while he is asexual, he still desires a romantic relationship. However, it proves to be difficult to find someone else who wants a sexless relationship.
Seems like a pretty thin user base for an app.
But without it, asexual romantics might end up settling for just whatever other asexual romantics they might meet, even if they have nothing else in common.
There is promise with Yolanda Buenaventura of the Better Business Bureau, but it turns out that the only thing they have in common is their asexuality. He also tries to make it work with Emily again by building her a sex robot, but not even the charm of Henry Fondle is enough to replace having sex with someone you love. Throughout the season, we see Todd try to become someone else in order to please others. He somehow even becomes the president of ad sales at whattimeisit.rightnow.com, but he doesn't need to impress anyone. He just needs to be Todd. This is a lesson he learns after the saddest death in the show.
I love you, Father.
It's okay. It's over now.
It's all over.
Whew. Okay.
This is also the season where Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter finally divorce. After their turbulent marriage, they realize that they are no longer compatible with each other. Mr. Peanut Butter rebounds pretty quickly though, with a young waitress named Pickles Aplenty. And when I say young, I mean that they have a 24-year age gap. It seems that Mr. Peanut Butter has a whole learner to Capricorn thing going on. An aspect that gets explored in the episode Mr. Peanut Butter's Booze. Told over 4 separate Halloween parties, the episode chronicles Mr. Peanut Butter's failed relationships with his previous wives. It showcases the fact that Mr. Peanut Butter is unable to mature with his partners, leading to a falling out. The only way for him to be able to maintain a relationship is to grow up himself, or else he will continue to date women in their 20s, until they eventually outgrow him.
That's kind of my point. You don't ruin these women, they just grow up.
Diane didn't take the divorce particularly well, leading her to travel to Vietnam to reconnect with her roots. However, despite being Vietnamese, she can never quite connect with her culture, due to the fact that she was born and raised in Boston, with a stereotypical Boston family. I can relate to Diane here. Even though I am the son of immigrants, whenever we visit their home country, I couldn't help but feel like a tourist. So I feel what Diane is going through when she tries to find something meaningful in Vietnam, but only end up more alone than ever. Upon returning, Diane becomes a writing consultant to Filbert after it was found out that the show, despite claiming to deconstruct misogyny, is pretty misogynistic itself.
It's posing as a deconstruction of the edifice of toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity, yep, right.
But it's just using that as an excuse to relish in its own excesses.
Diane's story has once again been intertwined with Bojack's, especially once she learned from Ana Spanakopita that Bojack did something in New Mexico.
In fact, I wanted to share this with you, woman to woman.
On the boat, there was a girl.
What?
In New Mexico. And she trusted me.
After Bojack has proven that he will never improve, and refuses to get therapy, even though he essentially stole Diane's therapist, Diane writes Filbert to be more in line with Bojack. It really gives perspective on how Diane sees Bojack if she uses him as an inspiration to create a deeply flawed character, even lifting lines directly from his confession tape.
I'll never forget that night on the USS New Mexico.
Why are you telling me all this?
It's just good to have someone to talk to.
However, creating a character like Filbert can be rather tricky. This is a character that does awful things, but at the same time is given vulnerabilities that make him more human. This is a very complex and well-rounded character, but it can lead to certain people getting the wrong message. It can lead to people rationalizing their shitty behavior, thinking that it's alright to do awful things, because everyone has done things they regret.
And I think that that's what this show says, is that we're all terrible, so therefore we're all okay.
What?
And I think that's a really powerful message.
Okay. Of course, this was not the intention of the writers, but that will not stop people from idolizing characters they shouldn't. It's not hard to see the parallels between Filbert and Bojack. This is the exact issue that writers constantly deal with. It's a balancing act to showcase an interesting and complex, flawed character, but at the same time make it clear that the show is not condoning their actions at all. I believe that the show does a good job at emphasizing the fact that Bojack is not someone to look up to, but who knows? There will always be people who take it the wrong way. In making Filbert more like Bojack, the lines separating the show Filbert and Bojack's actual life start getting blurred. It doesn't help that after an onset injury, Bojack starts getting hopped up on painkillers. As more of Bojack's life seeps into Filbert, we also see Filbert start to infiltrate Bojack's life. Bojack wearing the Filbert costume off set is an immediate visual indicator of this. All this comes to a head in the Showstopper, the episode that really blends fiction and reality. Utilizing deceptive editing and disorienting imagery, the episode is an exploration of Bojack's guilt through his drug-induced paranoia. He believes that someone is out to get him, leading him to reflect on all the shitty things that he's done, complete with a musical number that basically reiterates a core theme of the show.
Don't stop dancing, don't stop dancing till the curtains fall.
Of course, no one is actually after him, but the whole ordeal leads him to strangle his co-star, Gina Cazador, nearly to death.
Okay, that's enough.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
A recurring symbol throughout the episode is the Filbert balloon, a balloon that Bojack directly faces at the end. It could mean many things. It could represent the fact that Bojack will always identify himself with the project he's currently working on. It could represent all of his flaws. In facing the balloon, he could be facing everything wrong with him, personified by a character inspired by his flaws. But it's left ambiguous. Much like the rest of the episode, we question what is real and what isn't. The strangulation could have been a career ender for Bojack, but everyone puts an effort to sweep it under the rug, not only to save the show, but to save Gina's career.
People know me because of my acting, and all that goes away if I'm just the girl who got choked by Bojack Horseman.
Unfortunately, in an industry like this, being the victim of abuse would forever associate you with that abuse, instead of whatever work you did. Saving the show was in vain though, but at least we end the season with a bit of hope, as Bojack will finally get some help and admit himself to rehab. Hopefully this will mark a turning point for Bojack's life. Maybe he will finally become a better person. For the most part, it does seem like Bojack is on the right track. He makes some really good progress to recovery. Sure, it takes him a while to be ready to leave rehab, and he causes some rather unfortunate mistakes. This includes accidentally causing his therapy horse, Dr. Champ, to relapse.
I want you to remember what you did to me.
I remember everything. I'm sober now.
But he is eventually able to sober up and go home. His home. The house where so much happened. Bojack's house has come to represent the old, self-destructive Bojack. He couldn't bring himself to live in his house anymore. This could be a sign that he's finally ready to move on with his life and have a fresh start. And he does exactly that. He gets a new outfit, a new haircut.
I look old.
And he goes to Connecticut. At first he just wanted to visit Hollyhock, but he soon became a professor at her university. And so starts a new chapter in Bojack's life. Being the final season will naturally lead to some closure on everyone's story arc. Princess Carolyn is finally able to adopt a baby, Ruthie. Ruthie stretches Princess Carolyn's work-life balance to its limits. But as always, she learns to adapt to whatever goes her way.
The Fugees were egregious when they got interviewed by Regis.
Oh yeah, and Chloe Grace Moretz was here too.
People are good. Fire! Bad!
She ends up nearly resolving her issues, and is finally able to have a completely healthy balance between her professional and personal life. In doing so, she hires Todd to be Ruthie's nanny, his first real stable job. He's come a long way from sleeping on Bojack's couch. However, he still has to deal with the way others perceive him, particularly his parents. They still see him as a disappointment, a screw-up who still has some growing up to do. Except he did grow up. He has his own place now. He has a new girlfriend, Maud. He doesn't need to prove anything. He's perfectly fine being himself. He doesn't need his parents' approval anymore, especially with how long it's been since they kicked him out. But at the same time, it definitely feels nice when they reunite after Todd donates his kidney to his mother. Though they weren't the best parents, you can tell that they only had Todd's best interest in mind. Todd doesn't have to forgive them, but it's nice that they're at least talking to each other again.
But maybe the robots could be powered by energy generated from sucking on pacifiers?
That is so smart. Babies love sucking.
Though Todd primarily served the purpose of providing comedy through his wacky antics, he really came into his own and became a well-rounded, three-dimensional character in his own right. Esteemed character actress Margot Martindale also resolves her character arc by helping out Todd to make up for her ruining his rock opera all those years ago. Mr. Peanut Butter has also been taken down a peg. As expected, his relationship with Pickles is not healthy, and he ends up cheating on her with Diane. Pickles eventually finds out, leading to their relationship falling apart, until its hilariously anticlimactic end.
Excuse me, I'm receiving a text message, and it appears we have broken up forever.
The whole event also becomes a scandal, with everyone in Hollywood turning on him. Naturally, everyone forgets about it after he becomes a meme, though. In all fairness, he is doing pretty well for himself. He is now part of a new TV series called Birthday Dad, based on a greeting card. He also did seem to mature somewhat, most evidently with his phone call with Diane.
I know there were times you would try to tell me something, and instead of listening, I just tried to fix it or convince you there wasn't a problem. I shouldn't have done that.
While he's still that energetic and naive goofball that we all know and love, he is now able to take a step back and realize his flaws. Diane has since moved to Chicago and found a new boyfriend. Guy is the cameraman for Girl Cruise, the company that Diane works for. They start dating while making videos together for Girl Cruise, though Diane does get frustrated when the company wants them to focus on so-called feel-good stories. Her conflict between making uplifting content versus real stories is one that follows her throughout the season. Diane decides that she wants to write a memoir herself, bringing her arc full circle. She even makes a deal with Princess Carolyn to get it published.
I sold it. You have 6 months. Enjoy the process.
However, she struggles to make any headway into the book. The whole process plunges her into a deep depression. As per Guy's advice, she starts taking antidepressants, but she feels as though the meds are stifling her writing process. She stops using them as a way to write better, but it just leads to her having a mental breakdown. Diane is convinced that the memoir is necessary. She needs to make use of her trauma in a productive way. Otherwise, what would be the point of it all?
Go Pats!
There's this notion that all great art comes from suffering, that trauma can be put to good use as long as it can create art that connects with people, that there is such a thing as good damage. And while this is true to some extent, there is just as much value in art that is made because it's fun. Art as a means to escape is just as valid as art as a means to make a statement. And deep down, Diane knows this. She used horsing around as a means to escape from her own toxic family life.
When I was a kid, I used to watch you on TV. And you know I didn't have the best family. Things weren't that great for me. But for half an hour every week, I got to watch this show about 4 people who had nobody, who came together and became a family. And for half an hour every week, I had a home.
So in a way, writing Ivy Tran Food Court Detective will likely help out any little girl that was in her situation, and she definitely had an easier time writing that book. So in the end, whether or not her damage was pointless is irrelevant. The important thing is learning to move on and do some good for the world. With everyone having a satisfying end to their arcs, it seems like as good a place as any to end the show. Right, Pete Repeat from Season 2, Episode 11, Escape from LA?
She had this man living in her house. We all went to prom together, me, my girlfriend, the girl, and the man. This guy bought us bourbon and practically forced us to drink it. And then when my girlfriend got alcohol poisoning, he just ditched us at the ER.
Who is he? Who is he?
Season 6's theme follows the dichotomy between moving on with your life and having your previous actions catch up to you. Did we really think that Bojack was gonna get away with all the shit he's done? All the lives he's ruined? All the damage he's caused? The show doesn't work the same way as The Simpsons or Family Guy, where every issue gets neatly resolved in 20 minutes, and the main character almost never gets held accountable for their actions. Bojack Horseman remembers everything that happens, and the harbinger of Bojack's comeuppance would come in the form of Paige Sinclair and Maximilian Bangs, 2 reporters for The Hollywood Reporter. Tasked to investigate the circumstances surrounding Sarah Lynn's death, they soon uncover a lot more than they bargained for. They also have a whole His Girl Friday thing going on.
Baxter, my boy, my dear, sweet, beautiful bridegroom, best put the champagne on ice. I've got a story that simply demands my attention.
Pete Repeat, or Peter Pocket, also makes his first appearance since Season 2. He meets Hollyhock at a party, where he tells her about what happened in New Mexico, leading to her distancing herself from Bojack. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, the reporters are sent to the Rattlesnack's diner to do some further investigation. Once they stop to eat, they discover something particularly newsworthy. Deep within the waitress's psyche, their lead is buried. Penny Carson has just what the reporters need: information on Bojack. Bojack's actions led to consequences beyond himself. Gina gained a reputation for being hard to work with.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
Kelsey is struggling to find a directing gig.
I didn't break into the Nixon Library alone, and yet I'm the only one whose career has suffered. Why do you think that is?
And Hollyhock suffers from anxiety. Additionally, the Carson family can never escape from Bojack's presence, even years after they kicked him out. And despite claiming to have changed for the better, Bojack never properly addressed his wrongdoings. And I don't just mean feeling sorry about them. I mean really truly facing the consequences. That is, until his interview with Biscuits Braxby. The interview went well, all things considered. Biscuits gave some softball questions, and Bojack was able to answer them in a way to paint him sympathetically.
If you could talk to her mother now, what would you say to her?
I would say, I wish you could know how sorry I am.
And the apology is doing wonders for his career. But this success leads Bojack to revert to his old habits.
I'm ready to move on and go back to Connecticut. But it does feel good to be part of the conversation again.
In his arrogance, he schedules his second interview, one that would spell his downfall.
When she was intoxicated, you had sex with her. And when she was sober, you gave her the heroin that killed her. Then, in an effort to cover for yourself, you waited to call the paramedics that might have saved her life. And you don't think you have any power over women.
In the few hours before Bojack's life gets ruined, he makes a quick stop. He goes to the Laugh Shack, the place where his career started. After seeing his career's end on the TV at the bar, he puts on one final stand-up act. Despite how much of an awful person Bojack is, you can't help but sympathize with him. This is someone who repeatedly makes bad decision after bad decision without ever making the effort to better himself. But once he finally does make the effort to sober up and change for the better, his past will come back to bite him in the ass. He definitely deserves what's coming to him, but it's still sad to think that it's come to this. Bojack's reputation is ruined. His relationships with everyone he cares about is ruined. He even loses his house. And when things couldn't get any worse, Angela Diaz comes back with an offer. Horseman Around is about to be released on Blu-ray, but with the controversy surrounding Bojack, they plan to cut him out of every episode.
So it'll just be around?
Horseman Around was Bojack's only real claim to fame. If anything else, he was always the horse from Horseman Around, so removing him from the show would be removing a large part of his identity. And with the deal finalized, Bojack relapses.
Now,
it's very disturbing to see Bojack sink into his rock bottom, as he does to Bojack. Angela also reveals that she was bluffing when she threatened to fire Herb.
I had this whole speech I practiced in the mirror. I was terrified you were going to call my bluff.
Bluff?
Of course, this angers Bojack, causing him to blame her for everything he did.
Every stupid decision I made, every bad thing that has ever happened, it all started because of you.
But at the end of the day, it was Bojack who didn't stand up for Herb. It was Bojack who didn't talk to Herb for decades. It was all Bojack. Bojack then breaks into his old house, representing his return to his old self. And after watching his old screen test, we get possibly the most haunting imagery in the whole show.
Buckle up, buddy. Your life is about to start.
The view from halfway down is in a league of its own. The penultimate episode features the return of characters past deceased in the show. The episode was foreshadowed in the beginning of the season, when Bojack tells Dr. Champ about his recurring dream involving having dinner with the dead people he knew.
You told me everything. You told me about that dream you keep having where you go to a dinner party.
So upon first impression, the episode is just a recreation of said dream. The episode is rife with symbolism, motifs, and callbacks. The house that the episode takes place in is an amalgam of several locations throughout the series, adorned with several paintings and photographs that populated the background. There's even the swimming pool painting, albeit with an unsettling difference. At the dinner, everyone talks about their lives and personal philosophies. Something to note here is that everyone's dinner consists of what they ate before they died, the exception being Zach Braff, who was the waiter, representing the fact that he was cannibalized. A mysterious black liquid drips on Bojack as he tries to eat his meal, consisting of pills and pool water.
Does anyone else's water taste like chlorine?
His chair is also shaped like a casket. If it wasn't made clear at this point, the episode reveals that Bojack is drowning in his former pool. A recurring motif throughout the entire show is water and drowning. Bojack imagines himself drowning when he gets old. He almost drowns when he backs his Tesla into his pool. Even the title sequence before nearly every episode ends with Bojack falling into his pool, so it only makes sense to have Bojack finally drown, an event that the entire series was alluding to before this. The other characters put on a show for Bojack, representing their lives, and ultimately, their deaths, symbolically portrayed by A Door to the Void. Sarah Lynn performs a reprise of Don't Stop Dancing, with lyrics changed to better suit Sarah Lynn's life.
A song you taught me when I was small. Don't stop dancing. Don't stop dancing.
Beatrice performs a ribbon dance, while Crackerjack performs their special song, and Secretaria, who has Butterscotch's voice as a way to symbolize him being a father figure to Bojack, reads a poem describing his regrets after jumping off the bridge to his death.
I wish I could have known about the view from halfway down!
Soon enough, all that's left is Bojack and Herb, who parts with some truly haunting last words.
See you on the other side.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
With the tar consuming everything and chasing Bojack, he makes a phone call to Diane, but he realizes that Diane can't help him, and his actual call went to voicemail. All he can do now is have a final comforting conversation with Diane as the tar consumes him.
How was your day?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah. My day was good.
Except he didn't die. After a few fake-out jokes, it's revealed that the current owners of the house have rescued Bojack, and he's now serving prison for breaking and entering. The final episode is a nice way to end the series, with each main character getting their own segment with Bojack to put a final bit of closure on their arcs. This is emphasized by the fact that there are no side characters with speaking roles. This is all set to the backdrop of Princess Carolyn's wedding with Judah.
I love you, Princess Carolyn.
Mr. Peanut Butter finally fixes the Hollywood sign, a culmination of 2 running gags.
Let's say goodbye to the era of Hollywood forever and say hello to Hollywood!
Todd gives Bojack some of his philosophy, albeit in his own Todd way.
You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. You turn yourself around. That's what it's all about.
Princess Carolyn and Bojack have one last dance together, where she gets assured about her happiness.
So what do you think? Are you gonna marry him?
Well, I already got the dress.
But you didn't need me to say any of that, did you?
I guess I didn't.
And finally, Bojack goes to the rooftop to see Diane. We hear about Diane's side of the story when Bojack called her before his near death.
Call me back if you don't want me to go swimming. Otherwise, I'm just gonna assume you don't care. I thought you were dead.
She also reveals that she married Guy. Diane has changed a lot since she left Los Angeles. She had a lot of bad experiences in the city, but she doesn't regret it, as it helped shape who she is now.
I think there are people that help you become the person that you end up being, and you can be grateful for them, even if they were never meant to be in your life forever.
After telling a funny story about prison, the episode ends with Bojack and Diane looking at the sky in silence.
Life's a bitch and then you die, right?
Sometimes. Sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living.
Yeah.
But it's a nice night, huh?
Yeah. This is nice.
Mr. Blue, I told you that I love you, please believe me.
This is truly a one-of-a-kind show. Through the deconstruction of conventional sitcom tropes, Bojack Horseman is a thought-provoking and deeply captivating show that realistically portrays mental illness and the effects that someone can have on others. The characters, though they start off as simple archetypes, really grow and evolve into truly fleshed-out three-dimensional people by the end of the show. It's never afraid to tackle difficult subjects, such as trauma, abuse, and power dynamics, and it does so with grace. It also doesn't forget to be funny, with the comedy never undercutting the serious moments, sometimes even enhancing them. This is a show that can be bleak and hopeless, but also silly and ridiculous, poignant and profound, but also sweet and optimistic. It's able to pull off many tones effortlessly, and it's not afraid to become more artistic with the episodes. Of course, this video isn't a very comprehensive look at the series, so I couldn't get into every aspect of what makes the show great. As I said, it's a dense show, and there are tons of other videos that get into the specifics of the series. I mostly wanted this video to be a general overview of the series, with some of my analysis. This is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I hope I did it justice, because at the end of the day, what else would be the point of the video? Why else would I decide to ramble on for an hour about Bojack Horseman?
Mr. Blue, I told you that I love you, please believe